Another individual who's making a tremendous contribution to the future of water is this morning's keynote speaker, Joe Whitworth. Joe is the president of the Freshwater Trust, a nonprofit organization that protects and restores freshwater ecosystems through science, technology, and incentive-based solutions. In his book, Quantified, Redefining Conservation for the Next Economy, Joe draws lessons from the world's most tech-savvy, high-impact organizations to show how we can make real gains for the environment and chart a new course for water conservation. Please welcome Joe Whitworth.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks to the Water Environment Federation for having me here this morning. Again, my name is Joe Whitworth, president of the Freshwater Trust, and I'm pretty fired up to see you this morning and speak to you about my new book and what it means for the environment, the economy, and ultimately the future of water. My journey here started a little bit upstream. If you go up the Mississippi to the Missouri, to the Sheraton River, and then on up the Sheraton to a little creek called Blackbird, I began this journey, honestly, in a soybean field with my grandpa, who was one of those guys who would work all day, and then to unwind after supper, we would go down to the lower bean field and hoe that field. So I'm 5, I'm not really good at hoeing, so he was teaching me how to do that, and the whole time he's talking about, you know, what you talk to your grandkid about. And in my case, and this was one of the things that I really discovered and remembered during the course of writing the book, my grandpa used to say, "No man has the right to take more from the land than the land can take." Now, this is a man who probably didn't receive an 8th grade education, but in his way, what he was talking about is everything that every farmer will understand, which is if I take care of this land's going to take care of me, it's going to take care of my family. And in a different sense, what he was talking about is he saw commerce and stewardship, when they're operating correctly, are operating together, right? The economy and the environment, when they're operating correctly, operate together. Simple man, simple idea, super profound, right? I grew up, I go out into the world says, that's not how it works, kid. This is a zero-sum battle where the environment wins when the economy loses and vice versa. And so that set up a pretty big conflict in me, right? Either the world is set up wrong, engineered wrong, as Landro mentioned this morning, or my grandpa was a liar. I, of course, choose not to think that my grandpa is a liar. I think we got it set up wrong. And for me, I've dedicated my life, kind of on accident, to fixing that problem. And the good news is it's fixable. And what's pretty cool is my grandpa is not alone in his ideas.
Now, a while back, I heard a story about the Rogue River in Oregon. Every year, the Rogue is filled with salmon swimming upstream to spawn. But because factories were allowing warm water to run back into the river, the temperature was becoming too high for the salmon to survive. So to fix the problem, the town could have required the company to buy expensive cooling equipment, but that would have hurt the local economy. Instead, they decided to pay farmers and ranchers to plant trees along the banks of the river. And that helped to cool the water at a fraction of the cost. So it worked for business, it worked for farmers, it worked for salmon.
That's an applause line, people. Wake it up. You missed like 3 this morning already. I know it's early. I mean, I think people did stay out a little bit later last night than this morning would suggest. I'll come back to what the president was talking about as one of our projects that we did up in Oregon a little bit later, but I'll give you a little bit of background on the Freshwater Trust, just for context. We started like a lot of traditional conservation groups did, but in our case, we have had a good history of leaning into white space. We do things that haven't been done because we're really good at sizing up what needs to be done, and then we act on it. So we started really getting active in the 90s when we began to list several of the first Pacific salmon under the Endangered Species Act, which does a lot of good things if you want to really stop bad things from happening. But it's more than just stopping bad things from happening. It also is about making good things happen. And that's why we turned to working with landowners to figure out how to work with them to use less water. So we started the world's first water trust model, where we take and purchase excess irrigation water or lease excess irrigation water and put it in stream for the benefit of the stream. That model is now proliferated around the American West and is moving around the globe. We have high hopes for that transaction model, but we still have a long, long way to go. And over the last few years, really what we've started to look at is how to use data and technology to accelerate the pace of restoration in the world and quantify the environmental uplift from every single action that we take. Now, our work has changed over the years because the world has changed over the years, and it's going to keep on changing. And so what we need to do going forward is really figure out what's the balance. How do we get the environment and the economy to operate correctly? For my money, it really comes down to agriculture and water. This interface is critical. It's a limiting factor for life on Earth. Of the 1% of fresh water that's available for us all, 70% of it goes to raising crops or growing animals that we can eat, right? The average American diet takes about 1,320 gallons of water every single day to put dinner on the table. And if you're in New Orleans, it's more than that. But what that means is, what has become mission critical for us is figuring out ways to work with landowners so they can do more with less in a profitable way. Our need for food will double in the next 20 years, and the stresses that we are putting on our environment at a rate, well, as we're growing at a rate of 1 billion people a decade, really puts into question whether or not we can feed that population without destroying the very resources that are required to do that in the first place. We're not off to a good start, right? We have exploding dead zones. We have California happening, which again, engineering problem, right? Nature makes drought, but man makes scarcity. If we don't get ahead of this problem in a hurry, it's going to be our undoing. So, and it is coming a lot faster and a lot harder than a lot of people outside of this room understand, right? Folks in here, this is about as friendly an audience as a guy like me could get. But I will tell you, very few people see it coming. And in many ways, it's already here. What also is here is a lot of great things. Science and technology are touching every part of our lives and transforming entire sectors overnight, right? Somehow, water management, particularly in agricultural settings, has been left behind. It's resisted all temptation to move into this century. If you've ever seen somebody's water sprinkler hit the sidewalk every afternoon, you get a sense of what we're doing in ag fields across this country every single day. And in the case of California and other parts of the West, you know, not just all summer, but literally all year round. Doesn't have to be like that. The technology, of course, is already here. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, right? We have soil sensors. We have the ability to use weather monitors to put water on the field or not. We have various different types of technology that can allow a farmer to make real-time decisions that are informed by data to figure out whether they want to put fertilizer on their field or not, or in what amount, or at what time. And so these are things that we do need to take advantage of. We're not taking advantage of it. We're starting, though, one of the most exciting technologies that we have helped build is we have the ability now to X-ray nature, right? We can work with partners like Google, and we can pinpoint places within a watershed that need specific help, and we can quantify the baseline and the uplift. Big data has come to conservation, and not a moment too soon. We can sort through millions of acres to find the hundreds that we need. But I gotta get this one. This isn't just a tech fix. This isn't about gadgets, right? This is about stuff that works. Simple things like keeping cows out of the riparian zone so your trees can grow up and provide shade to cool the watershed, which we can quantify. They can sequester carbon out of the soil and out of the atmosphere, which we can quantify. That can stop sediments from getting into the waterway in the first place, which we can quantify. Nutrients, which we can keep out of the waterway in the first place, which we can quantify, right? It's simple things at the base. And this is something that's been lost, I think, by the modern environmental movement. This is not a paper exercise anymore. I can make a pretty good argument, in fact, I do in the book if you read it. And it's a laugh line. Jeez. Can we turn these lights around? So, in the book, I argue pretty effectively that the environmental war is over, and the Greens won. But they only won on paper. There is no through line from what we have written on paper that got us all those great procedural wins that goes all the way to the ground. This is about outcomes. We are moving into an era where I believe every form of government needs to shift from process to outcomes. The age of patch and tinker is over. The problems are too big, they're growing too fast, they're far too complex. We have got to start driving to those things. This is a people exercise. We can take care of the process with the architecture of software, and we can track things like we have never seen before. We have to focus on things that work. And so, for me, when I look at 21st century conservation, there are a few things that really stand out to me, and I think my grandpa would agree with them. I believe that farmers can and should be compensated for growing a bushel of nature as if they were going to be growing a bushel of corn or growing a pound of beef. I believe that water should be priced by a market and managed as an asset instead of a simple input into a low-value crop. I believe that everyone, who did that? Check under your seat, you got a new TV. I believe that everyone, everywhere, should get real-time information about their watershed that allows them to make good decisions about how to manage their question. In short, I see a world that works. That's what 21st century conservation is all about. It's not about the he said, she said, who wins on a piece of paper. It either works for real or it doesn't matter. So, with all this great insight, I wrote a book, sweet book, signing later on today. There you go. I see a few of you have already read it, or at least got a copy, which sort of counts as reading a book nowadays. It's a very interesting phenomenon. So anyway, I looked across several sectors. I looked at certainly the conservation sector, putting my own organization at the top of the list. I looked at agriculture, of course. I looked at government and agencies. I looked at philanthropy, and I looked at business. And there are a lot of great examples, and there are a lot of not so great examples. I didn't cover the super negative examples because my environmental colleagues have already done that. sort of, if you go into if you do the research needed to write a book, you read like everything ever written about the environment, it is super depressing. We have covered and admired the problem to death. And so I went for the solution side of this. But there are 5 basic elements. I'm going to run you through those today. And what's interesting about these is whether you're talking about a project or a program or an organization or a governance structure or a nation, these elements scale. Your business can grow because of these elements if you understand them pretty well. And it's not, you know, I ripped all the really good ideas off of somebody else. So, you know, don't feel like you're taking my word for it. There are a lot of great examples that led me to this. So, the first one, situational awareness. Situational awareness is actually, I think, originally a military term. It was popularized in business by Andy Grove, who was one of the early CEOs of Intel. And basically, what it is, if you're a fighter pilot, or your kid's a fighter pilot, Dr. Bowen's son is an Air Force fighter pilot, which is kind of cool. He's got a video he'll show you later. Actually, we should throw that up right after I speak. But we live in a dynamic space. But not everybody acts like we live in a dynamic space. That's why businesses don't do well. They're not paying attention. Who in this room has a phone? Okay, there are like 30 people right here, and nobody else has a phone? Hey, you guys, in the back, do you have a phone? Hey, nice, okay. So everybody's got a phone. Tell me who's got a BlackBerry. Raise your hand. 1. Seriously, raise your hand if you have a BlackBerry. I already counted you, you're 1. 2, okay, we got less than 10. BlackBerry was not situationally aware. The fundamentals of their business changed, and they got smoked by Apple and Android. Right? We did too. Back in the late 60s, when rivers were catching on fire, everybody's like, I get it, we got a problem. Rivers aren't supposed to burn. That's an easy one. And I will say, we completely nailed it. And we stopped all of the pipes from polluting into our rivers. Right? We knocked that out. But today, more than a full generation of environmental effort later, more than half of our nation's 3.7 million stream miles are impaired. And we're not acting like it. That's got to change. I'll give you guys a pop quiz. So, you don't have to answer this out loud, but I am going to ask you, who pays the most for pollution? And who among these causes the least amount of pollution? Right? You can say that if you grow up bucking hay. I know the answer, right? You know the answer too. This is the one piece of the puzzle that we have not buttoned down. Sorry to mix metaphors, but this is what we've got to deal with, right? So we have to pay attention and find ways forward. We live in a dynamic world, not a steady state world. We have how many hundreds of billions of dollars, actually trillions of dollars, in deferred maintenance for infrastructure. We fixed it once, shouldn't that cover it? You look at climate change. It was flat for a long time. I mean, I don't want to speak in geologic times, but you know, certainly since we were all young, it's been pretty steady state. It's starting to spike up. In the next 20 years, half of all of our farmland will change hands based on the demographics of our aging farming population. And if, when those acres transition, it's managed in a traditional way, we will not get home. We are not set up to double our agricultural output without completely destroying the underlying water resource. We cannot do it. So, being aware that things are changing, and they're always changing. If we look backward, we see a steady state. That's where all the laws were set up. That's where all the policy was written. That's where all the basic work was done. And we did a great job. We did a great job, but the world is changing. And if we don't change, we will drive this plane into the side of the mountain. And we are on track to do that. Outcomes. Simple word, very difficult thing to do. We are so caught up in the little things and following process and not getting in trouble that we have lost sight of what we're doing. Larry Page, founder of Google, likes this thing called, he calls it the power of 10x. 1,000% improvements. When you go in and look at a problem, he does not want 10% improvement or 50% improvement or even 100% improvement. 1,000% improvement forces you to rethink how the question itself is being asked. And then you can chase all kinds of new possibilities. So when I think about solving a problem, I like to go big, because I think we're at a time where we have to go big. In law school, second year of law school, if you're an environmental natural resources guy, what they do is they teach you how to win at process. Second year of law school, you know how to stop almost any action that requires governmental decision making. And so if you hold that up, that hold the line mentality, which would be great if we started that at the dawn of the industrial era, right? That would have been super. We would have had it all figured out. No externalities, no downstream impacts. It would have been super. But we didn't. And right now, hold the line, it's too late. We can't just hold the line. We have got to improve, and we've got to improve more than just a little bit here and a little bit there, right? 1,000% versus hold the line, 0%. 0% improvement is not going to get us where we need to be. So one of the things that I outline in the book is the architecture of how to fix the dead zone. And it is completely doable. This is the one thing that I will measure my career on. Either by the time I'm done, the 8,000 square mile dead zone is fixed, or I fell short. Right? I have no interest in patching and tinkering because we are past that. You guys all know that. You're living in a moment that does not allow us to just sort of sit back and watch it coast in. This is fixable if we quantify where we're at, if we use real-time information, if we use all of the data that's available and build a bunch of it ourselves, if we can engage markets, if we have a government that does not pay for effort but only pays for outcomes, if we have philanthropy that does not pay for effort but only pays for outcomes, right? Writing a grant, hoping you're going to get something done, and then explaining yourself how you fell short. I don't know what the numbers are that foundations and agencies have received over the years, but I will tell you it is a vast majority. In this country, we spend $10 billion, give or take, on natural resource restoration and freshwater ecosystems. And we don't know what we're getting. It's got to stop. So you take those first two things, you take situational awareness, and you take the outcome you want, you have yourself a design problem. You have a design issue now. You can get into systems thinking, right? I kind of think of that scene from Apollo 13 where Ed Harris walks into the room and he throws all the pile of junk on the table and he's got all the engineers in there and he says, you have 64 pieces, you have 38 minutes, that square tube has to get into this round opening Failure's not an option. That's system thinking. That's design thinking, right? And so what you do, if you look at those parts and you look at the problem and you figure out whether or not you've got the stuff to get it done, the answer isn't, in most of those instances, oh, what we have to do is just more of the same. More of the same got us here, and we are getting increasingly less and less from our effort, right? So we have to know where we're going, and we have to be willing to innovate. And we talked about technology, and that line, that map of red lines, those are the maps that are 303D listed streams in the United States. Like I said, more than half of our 3.7 million stream miles. Here's what's interesting about that map. There are several things interesting about it. It took this country about 12 years to come up with that map. There are 13,000 satellites that circle this Earth every 90 minutes. Most of them are able to send high-resolution imagery that can go into algorithms, models, and just tracking devices. There is no reason for us to wait 12 years for anything anymore. There's just no reason. We have got to use this technology. And a lot of the folks that are here, you're already doing this, right? If you walk through the hall downstairs, you can't miss that, right? But we've got to engage it more fully. It can't be a set of really good examples here and there. It has to be the norm. The other thing, coming back to, this old cowboy, innovation isn't just gee whiz tech stuff. Innovation are new methods, new transactions. In the case of the environment versus conservation, it looks a lot like collaboration, right? It's a shame that innovation can sort of fit that one in now, but it's where we're at. But again, so you have to bring together all the parts because this moves into the real world, right? This is, all the algorithms are great, but they ultimately have to apply. Big ideas are a dime a dozen, right? Big ideas that get implemented can change the world. Ripping off your Yoko Ono stuff. That was better, but you used it. I had never heard it. Nice laugh catch, people. So the data and analytics piece is separate from the innovation, right? This is about tracking it. This is about making sense of the $10 billion that we spend in this country without worrying about outcomes. We spend money. We have thrown money at the problem, and we have missed. But now we can hit it. We're doing a job in the Snake River Basin in Idaho. We have literally sorted through 39 million acres to find the 3,000 to 4,000 that we need that will fix the phosphorus, sediment, and temperature problems. That bucket of $10 billion right now does not get us $10 billion worth of conservation outcomes. But if we use precision-based conservation, quantified conservation, that bucket gets really big really fast. If you are spending $1 on conservation, I can tell you how to spend it better, right? We've got to take advantage of that. So now, back to President Obama. Very quick case study. The Rogue River in Oregon is a pretty small system. It was one of the first 9 designated wild and scenic, but there's a small little town there called Medford, Oregon, and they had a temperature issue. They had a permit requirement of 300 million kilocalories a day, and to meet their requirement, their first option was, we're going to dig a hole, we're going to pump the water out after it's been treated, we're going to wait until it cools down for a few days, and then we're going to pump it back into the Rogue River. Go engineers, right? That's right. Most of the time, I'm pro-engineer, trust me. I want some more tools in the toolkit. The green infrastructure, done to criterion certain, that's really important. But that was going to cost them between 17 and 20 million bucks. They're going to have to bond for it. Not really great times to bond for things. You know, politics, I don't know if there's been a lot of winning political conversations that started with, I want more money from taxpayers lately, meaning like the last few decades. It happens. But what we were able to do, once we could figure out the equivalencies, the lingua franca between the environment and the economy, in this case, was a kilocalorie, right? That's the unit of trade. And because we now know that if you look at certain parcels of ground and they have a certain slope and a certain soil, you can plant 19 to 2,400 native stems an acre and you can get a known quantity of kilocalories. So what we did was we went out and we worked with the city of Medford and the landowners, and basically we're getting them 600 million kilocalories a day for a cost of about $6.5 million, which is a great thing. They're in compliance. They have saved some money. And from a conservation perspective, we're getting all those kilocalories, but that's not all we're getting, right? Those trees are doing more than just shading the watershed, right? They're sequestering carbon. They're stabilizing banks from sediment runoff. They're uptaking nutrients that would have otherwise gone into that system, all of which we can track, and we should track. But for me, it's an environmental 4-fer or 5-fer, and I didn't have to get up and exhort them into doing it because it's the right thing to do, right? I mean, I'm tired of that argument. It's a smart thing to do. I mean, we're living in a time now where the best investments are actually the most sustainable investments. That's a pretty cool time to be living. So anyway, when we got President Obama to notice that, it was a great moment for us. And we have started to draw up the rules with EPA Region 10, or at least a template. Nobody wants to make rules. Nobody wants to pass legislation. Nobody wants to sign a letter with a logo on it. And so what we have to do now is template and standardize the legal, biological, and transactional mechanics of these things. So the first deal looks like the 5th deal, looks like the 5,000th deal. You can't have the situation like we have in Chesapeakeistan, where what counts in West Virginia doesn't count in Virginia, and that doesn't count in Maryland, and that doesn't count in Pennsylvania. That's not going to fix that bay. That bay is fixable, but not with all these Civil War currencies running around in terms of ecosystem services. We have got to standardize, right? No exceptions. I understand everybody is from a different place, but it ain't that different. 16 ways to fix a river exist in this world, no matter what your geography. 16 ways. If you look at the billions of dollars that we're spending and the hundreds of thousands of people that are working on it, 16 is a pretty doggone small denominator, right? That's a tiny denominator. And even though all the agencies have different logos, different uniforms, all the foundations have different colors of money, the fact of the matter is we are going to a very finite place. It is known and it is knowable, and we have got to just turn it over. And we have to make gain with every single deal. We live in an age now where the super complex can toggle with the super simple, right? Everybody here, with the exception of the BlackBerry users, is going number 1. I love you. Patient 0. We all have a phone, and it's a supercomputer in our pocket. It connects us to the world in ways that we never, ever imagined before. And it's so, and that's on the back end. But on the front end, it's so intuitive and simple, nobody read the instruction manual, except for the BlackBerry users. I'm sorry, I'm leaving fast that way. We can manage this accounting. We can do these things, and we don't have to just ask for permission. We can just do it. Nobody asked me if I wanted to spend 1,800 gallons to make my blue jeans. You know, to grow the cotton to spin, or to grow the cotton to spin the thread to make the blue jeans, right? It takes water for that. Nobody asked me that. But I think that there is a way in the accounting closed-loop accounting that can account for that and actually put water back in the Colorado River for not much that you would ever notice when you pay for your blue jeans, right? Those are the things we have to take back. Those are the kinds of things that engineers can make a really big difference with. And that's what it's going to take to turn the red lines to blue. So, I'm ultimately here to recruit you guys, right? We are living in an era that will literally decide the limits of human existence on this planet. I'm not melodramatic, I'm not a bleeding heart, but it's just true. We don't have a lot of time here, right? And if you are working for a paycheck, I would say get a move on. We've got to do more than take care of our families. There is something more important here. Now, you have already self-selected, right? You are living smack dab in the center of this issue, right? You didn't get here by accident. We got to make something of this, right? We have to take advantage of the opportunities we have. The problems that we have, way bigger than ever before. Way bigger, way bigger. But so is our ability to solve those problems. Jim Gennard, who is the founder of Oakley, the glasses place, he actually started out as a motocross guy, motorcycles. And when he was a kid, he noticed that as he rode these long races, his hands would get sweaty, his gloves would get sweaty, his grips would get sweaty, and slip off. He's like, man, wouldn't it be great if the sweatier I got, the grippier my grips got? Of course, all the motorcycle companies and the grip guys were like, that's impossible. You silly little kid, patted him on the head. He, of course, went out and did it. He understood what he needed to change. He said, I'm going to do something that's never been done before. He innovated, and then I guess he tracked his sales, but he killed it. One of the most inspiring quotes that I found in the research was his. And he said that everything in the world can and will be made better. The only questions that remain are when and by whom. And for my money, I got to answer now and by us. There's really no other choice. And it's not, I mean, that's not a heroic choice. That's a big, dumb, green idea. It's so obvious that we have to do that. So, to close and get really specific in recruiting you, read the book, give me your feedback. If you think I missed it, I want to hear it because I don't think I did. Second thing, understand we are living in the moment. This is an inflection point. This is not steady state of yesteryear. This is changing. People in this room have a huge say in how this ultimately plays out. We have got to be the problem solvers, the innovators of our time. And we cannot take effort for an answer. We have got to get results. If you look at, the predictions on the dollars that are going to be spent in this, we've got a lot of work to do. And everybody is going to be working full-time plus. The Hillary Clinton campaign, I read her infrastructure plan. It's about $290 billion. Green infrastructure should be a part of that. First 100 days, we're going to work our guts out to try and make sure that happens. Done in an appropriate way. Not a lot of details on the Trump infrastructure plan, honestly. But I did read in Fortune magazine that it will be at least twice as big as Hillary's. That's actually a fact. I just made that one up right here. And the last thing is, we're launching today a campaign for clear-eyed conservation. And what it means is basically, we're going to be spending a lot of money here. We're already spending a lot of money here. Let's spend it smart. And all I want from this group, and then about 100,000 other folks, is to go to our website at thefreshwatertrust.org and add your name to the list. If what I said here today makes sense to you, and you think that we will be better by implementing these ideas, we want you to be heard. We will put it on like moveon.org or whatever the petition channels are. But for me personally, it's the people that understand this issue, that say, it's a big issue, it's a fixable issue, and now we got to get going. That's what we're trying to do. So with that, I'll leave you a few minutes to go hit your, does BlackBerry get internet access? Sorry. Man, I beat the heck out of that poor dead horse. That's all I have for you this morning. I'm excited to go in and wear myself out walking through all of these halls and see what you guys are doing. I think this group is probably the biggest unsung innovative group that's out there. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Joe, thank you very much. Now's the time for you to go out, see the innovations that are in WEFTEC, take those innovations and put them to use. I hope you have a great week here. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this now concludes the opening general session of WEFTEC 2016.